Hey everyone. So today is Wednesday. I think we leave not this Saturday, but the next Saturday. So I got a little over a week to get this car back together and get to Florida for testing for Sick Week. I think I remember that I told you about the gear set in one of my previous videos in this transmission. So thanks to Alan Pope at Alan Pope Racing Transmissions, he got us a gear set. We got it in 3 days, I guess. I think we actually talked about it on Friday and it shipped out on Monday, and now we're here at Wednesday. So we had a second day, and that's a nice piece. It's a very expensive piece. Let me grab this. So when you think about racing, a lot of times you don't think about what it takes to make these cars go this fast. But this little gear set right here, this little set of stuff was $3,800 bucks. The first gear ratio makes it a little bit higher, just a little bit low first gear. What we're doing is we're having to baby this car out of the hole. We never can really hit it hard like most people do. Our 60 foot and our 330 is just not there like it should be. Our back door is there. Well, we fly out the back door. We just need to get the short numbers down. We'll put those back over here, and I'm going to tear into this transmission. I've already started. Got the valve body off, got the front pump out. I just cleaned the pump. I'm going to put it back together so we can, I'm going to clean each part as I take it out. I don't always do that, but I am today for whatever reason. And I'm going to go ahead and replace the clutches in the Sonax module. They aren't real bad, but I've got new ones. I'm going to go ahead and replace them. The heater came on. Sorry about that. But I'll go ahead and replace them. I'm going to do a time lapse on this transmission rebuild. I'm not going to get into details on it. One thing I learned on the internet is to stay away from transmission talk on Facebook or YouTube or anything, because everybody is an expert when it comes to transmissions, except me. I'm no expert. I've been doing it a long time, and I still don't know what I'm doing. Not enough to be considered an expert. I can make it work. I know the basics. I have a couple people that I deal with, one of them being Jake's Performance, and the other one is Alan Pope, that I trust with all my questions, and Greg at Sonax. So between those three, I can pretty much get anything figured out. But this one here has the Sonax module in it. I'll pull that out and show you. This replaces the drums. So that's a lifesaver. That's a beautiful piece of engineering. I'm going to go ahead and put clutches in it just because this one's got a lot of passes on it. You can still see the color of the fluid. It's not real bad. We could run it, and if I hadn't changed the gear set, I would never have known it. But that's where we're at. I'm going to get this put back together and get it back in the car. The things I'm doing that I'll show you guys is the center support in this transmission. It's just a standard 4L80 center support. The reason we use 4L80 is because it has this hole here for line lube. So we have a line on the outside of the transmission case, and you can see it over here, that feeds oil from the front pump to the center support. rather than just relying on it to go down the main shaft like typical. So it just adds a little bit of lube pressure. And these planetaries that Alan Pope helped to develop, and they're already in, so I can't really show them to you, but they have forced lube. So regular planetaries depend on basically splash lube to survive, and Alan came up with a way to make some rings and some adapters and make it to where the lube that's coming down the center tube, the center support, and the main shaft forces oil from that gear out into the planetaries and up and sprays directly at the bottom of the planetary gear. So it's just a forced lube deal, which is really important. With this gear ratio that we're putting in here, she's going to be in first gear longer, further down the track. Well, the planetaries, that's where they get their beating, is on first gear, second gear. They slow down in second gear. They're really spinning fast in first gear. Third gear, everything's locked up. So when you're going down the road, the planetaries are doing nothing. They're just all locked together. But first gear, you want to get out of first gear as quick as possible, except we are raising the gear ratio in the transmission, so she will be in first gear longer. So it makes sense to lubricate those. But one of the things I have to do here with this super triple throwdown planetary setup is these normally have, the center support has these 3/4 20 bolts that go in and hold this hardened ring. This outer part is hardened. This is where the sprag runs, holds it to the center support. So I've got to countersink them and put flatheads in there. So I'm just using a drill. It's not that critical because it's just holding it together. It's got 3 hardened steel pins that actually locates this. So I'm going to use 2 different countersinks. Make sure everything's running true. I'm going to countersink that fairly large, deep. Now that one there doesn't have exactly the right angle, so I'm going to use this older, duller one. To just, it's the right angle. Let me blow that out and just screw that in, and I'll show you what we're doing here. I'm also going to run a bottoming tap in there, 1/4 20 bottoming tap, just to freshen the threads. I look down inside and it almost looks like from GM it might have had some metal grindings. I couldn't tell for real, but right there at the bottom you can tell that it's actually cutting a thread. So I don't want to bottom a bolt out. I'm using stainless bolts because that's what I have, and dissimilar metals and all that. I will Loctite them in. Hopefully they'll never ever come out again. If I shorten a bolt just a little bit, I'm just going to test it, make sure that my countersink is deep enough. Oh, it looks good. So those 2 are done. I'll do the third one. It's just that this sits down in there next. You can look down in here and see where the sprag is. And I don't know why. I don't know if the gears are taller, but let me point. Right here is where those, man, that screwdriver is magnetic. Right there is where those bolts would be running around this area here. And that's not very deep, so the bolt heads would hit and bottom out in there. So they have to be countersunk. This one here, let's look at it. So here's the difference. You can see that step. For whatever reason, the one over there is straight out, and this one is recessed for that bolt head. So I'm assuming, I didn't look at it that way, but the gears may be taller, and they made them stronger that way by adding height to the gears. I'm assuming, I don't know that. And I'm sure if I was on a transmission page, I'd be enlightened to why. But whatever the case is, Alan told me that right there has to be done, and he's right. I can see where it's obvious. So I got one more to do, and then I can put the piston back in. That center support has a piston. That's what applies the intermediate clutches. I got to put that back together. I get that center support in. Once that's in, then it's fix the module. And I've only been part of doing a module once, and that was down at Jake's Performance. So I'm a little bit nervous about it. And the only reason is because there's little spacers, little rubber spacers that go between each clutch to help separate them. It's all really cool stuff, but I got to pay attention. And I have instructions, but you know, it just works so good. I don't want to mess anything up. So I'm going to replace part of the clutches in there. Part of them I'm not going to. They're fine. The forwards are fine. The directs are a little bit spotted. So we're going to replace those. I'll clean it up and put it back together. But that module's so cool. That lowers the rotating weight so much. This aluminum shell here instead of big heavy drums. In my transmission, I've got a steel billet front drum, which holds the forward clutches, and then an aluminum, big heavy aluminum direct drum back here. Well, when you overspeed a drum for whatever reason, like throwing it in neutral, or something happens in the transmission, and it can blow those drums apart because they can spin so much faster than the engine. But in here, the only thing that overspeeds is the clutches and the hub, the small billet hub that's inside here. This stuff doesn't overspeed, so it eliminates the chance of your Turbo 400 exploding like they are known to do. This is an SFI case, but you still don't want to blow a drum up in one. So that thing right there is, as far as I'm concerned, is a must-have.
It looks like something out of a spaceship.
It does. It probably has the same engineering and machine work as a spaceship has.
It does. Look at that.
It does. All right, let's finish this. Getting ready to put this thing back in the car. It's put back together. I think you got to see time lapse of most of that. There was times I'd forget to turn the phone on and record, but it's all back together except the converter. That's next. I'm gonna go back there and pull the converter apart. We had taken the stator out of our spare converter to take with us on drag week, I guess it was, because it's a different stall than the one that we run in here. The rest of the converter is the same. So rather than carry an extra whole converter, because we're kind of packed for space and weight, I just took the thing apart and took the stator out, and we carry that with us. I'm going to put it back in the converter that it came out of and put it in the car, because we're going to tighten the converter up just a little bit. Hopefully that'll lower our RPM going across the line. She's going to be going faster, more mile per hour, which means more RPM. So that's next. That's just 30-minute job, but I got to clean up my mess first. I got to clean up my table and put my tools away. And then once I get that converter stuff back in here, putting it back in the car isn't, but I don't know, maybe an hour and a half to put everything together. So I'll probably get that done tonight. And then I'm down to changing the oil filter, adding oil back in it, and I got to balance one rear wheel, one of the new 18-inch ones, balance a new tire, and maybe a little cleanup under here. And I'll probably run the valves and just look under the valve covers before we pack this thing in the trailer next week. But it's really that simple. There was nothing really wrong with this, and I didn't think there was. I did put some direct clutches in it. Everything else stayed the same. They were just a little bit spotted, and we're probably going to send those back to Sonex because they're doing their evaluation on why, and they want to see them. Not a big deal. They had a lot of passes and a lot of miles on them, and Sonex keeps up with that stuff so they can evaluate it, so make everybody's parts better if there's any way to do it. But it's like one of the transmission guys said, if you're not leaving some hot spots on the clutches, you're leaving some horsepower on the table. So that may be oversimplification, but that's what one of the famous transmission builders says. So it wasn't anything that would keep it from going. It wasn't something I would have taken it apart for, but since I was in there, we went ahead and did that. The rest of it's all that gear set back here that's gonna gear this thing up, not down, but gear it up. It had a pretty low gear set. One thing about a low gear set, like it had, the spread between first and second is bigger. It's greater than the gear set that's in here. These are close ratio gears. And the nice thing about the close ratio gears is the shock load between the 1-2 shift isn't nearly as severe as it is on like a stock gear set. These things were made back in the 60s, and they made them for trucks that didn't have a lot of horsepower. So first gear was 2.48, second gear is 1.48. So there was a whole revolution between the two. I've got 0.43, less than half a revolution between first and second now, and second to third is 0.33. So they're super close ratio. You barely will even notice the shift. You could probably get by with a 2-speed, but we need, because of the weight of this car, it's just a fine line in there on gear ratio. So I'm ready to put the converter, do the converter and put this thing back together and let it down on the ground. What I have here is our old converter and our spare converter, which is another Pro Torque EV1 converter. Same shells. Basically just different stator, and there's the stator. So I took the stator out of this spare to carry with us in case we wanted to tighten our converter up on drag week or stick week or whatever it was, I don't remember. And we've been carrying it ever since. Well, we never saw the need to tighten the converter until recently. We're making more power. We've never really been able to apply that power because of the gear ratio, part of it anyway, in the transmission. Well, I've changed that. So now I'm going to put the spare converter in, which will be tighter in hopes that everything will work better. Basically, it's always a gamble. You never know exactly what's going to happen, but it's pretty calculated. We kind of know what to expect. So I had just taken this stator out. I didn't do anything. I'm just going to look it over as I've got it open here. Make sure I didn't do anything else. That all looks good. This I'm going to blow off. I've been traveling with us for a while. Bearings are in. The diode is good. You can hear, stock converters have a sprag. These have a diode, which has got a bunch of segments. It's got grooves in the outer race, and it's got little flappers with springs behind them that lock in, kind of like a ratchet, just like your snap-on ratchet, but it only goes one way. So that locks the stator up instead of a sprag, which is weaker. Making sure everything looks as it should. And that'll only go in one way, because if you turn it over, not only does the bearing fall off, it doesn't locate, doesn't fit. They're offset. You can see it's got more angle on this side than it does on this side. So it goes in like this. Now you can put a sprag in backwards and your car won't go anywhere. This one's, the sprag has not been taken out of the what am I trying to say? The sprag's never come out of the stator, so I don't have to worry about that. I'm just putting it back together. Some think you need to use a new O-ring every time. It probably wouldn't hurt, but I'm not sure that I've got the right O-ring. Yeah, there's a square cut. This one's a square cut O-ring. I think I'm gonna put a new one in. I'm gonna get a pick tool off this O-ring out of here. It feels a little bit hard. So as long as I'm in here, and I don't want to do this again, I don't want to damage the O-ring either, because I might not have the right one. Kind of hard to get out. Okay, it's actually not a square cut. It's actually a round one. Let's see if these are the same. That red one looks to be the same. I think this is what Joe sent us as spares. So I think the red one's a better O-ring. So I'm gonna put that down in the groove. Let me blow some fluid out of there. Crud between the two halves of the flange here, the shell, to hold it out or crush it down or anything else. I'm going to wipe that out a little bit. I've seen these things apart at the drag strip and on the ground and everything else. People put them back together and they just go. They're pretty robust. Pro Torque makes an awesome converter. That O-ring seems kind of tight, kind of small. If it doesn't want to go in, I may have to see. Let's see what's in this. This is a kit, a rebuild kit. Those all appear to be the same. So I guess I just have to stretch it. So I'm going to take this cord out, set it right here, try to get that O-ring down in that groove. And it doesn't want to play nice. It's got to be in the groove. It's trying to slip up. And if it slips up, it will not be in the right spot and it'll crush when I tighten it down. Okay, that seems to be right. So that's good. Now there's a bearing race right there. There's a bearing on here and a race. I'll put that all back together after I make a nice little mess there. And I've got a dimple that I stamped in this. It's right here where this stud's at. Everything looks fine in here, which I think we've run this converter once, but not for very long. I don't really remember. It was a long time ago. Okay, this dimple here lines up with that. Make sure that O-ring's still in its groove, and it is. Set this puppy down. Put some nuts back on. And I have marked on the other converter, not necessarily old, 27 foot-pounds, and I use an inch-pound torque wrench to do that, 3/8, which is 324 inch-pounds. So I stamped that in the housing there so I don't have to look it up or guess. I try to do that on my main caps, my rods, everything. I try to stamp all that stuff in the block where I can read it when I'm working on the motor, so I don't have to go look numbers up. It's just right there handy. And I'll start all these by hand, and I'll probably bump them down with the Ugga machine. And it doesn't take much to get 27 foot-pounds. An Ugga or two will do that. So I'm not gonna Ugga it, I'm just gonna run them down. So I'm gonna look under here quickly, make sure that it's sitting down, because if that O-ring had come out, it would be raised up. So I'm just gonna just run them down like, oop, I gave it an Ugga. That might be 27 foot-pounds. Another, whoa, two or three Ugga. I gotta slow down. A lot of bolts. Doesn't make any sense to me why any converter is not a bolt together. Used to, we didn't think anything about it. We couldn't afford a bolt together because they were pretty fancy stuff. But just like I did there, just to do any service work, and we have these kits where we can replace bearings and seals, and not having the ability to do that, you have to send that converter in. They've got to put it in a lathe and cut it open and, you know, clean it, and they have to charge you for that. Used to, the converter people were protective of that. They didn't want people to be able to service the converters. You know, they wanted that work for themselves. But there's so many race cars and so much business out there that they realize that it's better if the racer can do it himself at the track, which is really important. I just, like I say, I can't imagine nowadays not having a bolt together converter. I've got, for my Nova upstairs, basically the same converter. I think it's that one, same numbers as that. But when I bought it, I couldn't afford a bolt together, I thought. And it's a weld together, and it's been an excellent converter. I sent it to Joe, you know, I don't know, a year or two ago, whenever, no, it's been when we built the 55. When I took the transmission out, we put this converter, or that one, in a 55. Mine was sitting there, so I put it in a box and sent it back to Pro Torque, and they cut it open and went through it, and it's upstairs fresh and ready to go. Sad part is I can't do that. You gotta balance them when you do that and weld them back together. They gotta be pressure tested. So it just makes sense to spin up and get a bolt together converter. So other than just torquing these bolts down, this is ready to go in a transmission. We're ready to shove that back in the car. so I've been kind of lax on my videos. Sorry about that. I got the transmission back together, and I don't know, what was it? Was it a holiday or something crazy? Why we go? I guess the snow. You guys were home. Snow, holiday. It's all the same thing. But anyway, I didn't record everything, and then I was recording, putting it in, and the phone went dead. So guess what? That's it. I don't think about it anymore. But anyway, transmission's back in. I changed the oil in it. The oil looked great. I ran the rockers, the lifters, everything was really good in the top. I don't see any problems at all. I've got 2 gallons of fluid in the transmission, so she's going to start it on methanol. It was on gas last time. So I put the belt back on the pump. She's going to start it, and we're going to get the fluid up to where it needs to be, and then she's going to spool it, see how it works. And the only reason is because the new converter, or the converter that I put in it, is tighter. I just want to make sure everything spools right, because it's a lot easier to change it back here on the lift than it is in the pits at the racetrack.
Can I add a promo into your video?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sure he told you we're getting ready for Sick Week. If you guys are coming to Sick Week, go to the Sick to Mag where you get tickets, wherever that's at. We'll put a link below. And use code AT Racing. Just AT and then Racing, and you get 10% off of your tickets.
To get in to watch?
Yeah.
Is that per track, or is that the whole event?
However you purchase your ticket. So it's
You
like...
can buy it either way?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I think that's correct, yes. And what are you doing over there?
Putting a tune in.
Switching to a race tune. So I've already switched the pump off in the back, and I put the belt on in the front. I got to get used to that again, because we've only done one race where we don't have to switch valves and all that stuff. I think it's ready to go. I think all you got to do is put the tune in. I switched the switch on the pump already, but I forgot to turn that on.
I'm just putting the last pass from drag weekend.
I'm going to turn this.
Are you excited that this isn't, you're not having to make sure that the motor isn't leaking because it didn't have to come apart this time?
It's really, really nice, because I didn't have hardly anything to clean up. I mean, I've wiped it down underneath, but I almost feel guilty because it's like I didn't take the pan off the motor. I didn't do much of anything.
Sure. Okay, I'm ready if you are.
Yeah, go ahead. It probably won't start right away because it's not been run on methanol.
We gotta get fuel to it too, I guess.
Yeah. What is that noise?
That was fuel. Oh, crap. My computer's restarting. I can still try to start this. I just can't spool it.
What was the noise, though? That's like injectors firing or something.
Oh, because don't they fire because when we try to prime them, remember?
No, do it one more time. Do it one more time. That is so weird. I have never heard that. I don't feel it in the injectors, but it's something. If it was a drive-by-wire, I'd say it's a throttle body, but it's not. I guess it's firing the injectors. I've never heard that.
I think we've got it set up in the table, but I've never heard it do that.
I never have. Try it and see what happens. This one over here is the third gear line pressure.
That was working.
Why would this one not work? That's odd. Oh, wait a minute. Well, maybe because it's not hooked up.
That'll do it.
So what is this?
So, let me get a couple wrenches here. This thing has 3 sensors on the transmission. One that I kind of engineered and added with Jake's help. So we can tell what our line pressure is in third gear. Because when we're burning so many transmissions up, we needed to know where the fluid was going when you shift to third gear, and if the third gear clutch was actually getting the fluid. Well, we made some modifications in the case, and we used this port over here on the side of the transmission to put a sensor, so when she shifts to third gear will automatically lose some pressure, and it's got a big bleed hole in the drum that will let pressure off, but we just wanted to monitor that. So I hooked that up, and I hooked this one up, which I was thinking was the converter charge pressure, but that's actually line pressure, or vice versa. I can't remember which one's which. But I had this hose for the converter charge up here, and I failed to hook it up. And this port right here on the side of this is just before the converter pressure valve. This valve here is what's dumping the converter charge back into the case. So that valve's got a preset pressure, and this is where you monitor it right here, and I just failed.
You can also see a lot of if something is going wrong in the transmission, third gear, monitoring third gear pressure, you can pretty much catch it before it happens.
It's like, why doesn't everybody do it? But they don't, you know.
I can watch it and see it and be like, no, we're about to have a problem, because like it's very, very telling.
Before we figured out why we were having so much trouble, Alex would almost make me mad. She'd say, we're about to burn third gear clutches up. Just like, stop it. But she's right, because she could tell by that pressure on that third gear sensor over there, and I can't get that line to start on there for some reason.
Can I turn the key on?
Yeah.
Alright, this is back up and going, so.
Yeah, you can start it. Just make sure all the fluids and everything's good, and I guess run it through the gears. Let's try the back up, reverse. So it's a few days later, and this has been sitting up here. Alex is long gone. She's at her shop working today. We've had snow. We've had a blizzard. We had like 8 or 9, 10 inches of snow for a couple days, but it's melting off. It's actually pretty nice outside right now. But everything checked out great on those spool tests. We did it twice, as you can see there. The first time, the only reason we did it a second time is because after the first time, when you notice when it idles down, it surges. It was up and down, up and down. It was hunting, and we couldn't figure that out. That was something that was odd. It wasn't something that it's ever done before. So we just decided to try it one more time, and it went back to normal. Everything was great after that. So it's I've done a few things since we did that spool test, and one of them is I beat the fender lips in. I never had to worry about it. With the 16-inch wheels, this thing was just fairly easy to get the wheels off of the thing at the track or here. The 18-inch changed everything. It's got 1 inch further out and 1 inch further in. I don't know that I probably ought to back up. I'm not sure that we even have video or anything on these 18-inch wheels, but these are 18-inch wide wheels that we just got in from Billet Specialties, solid centers that are not cut out. You can see the where they would normally cut them out in here. They leave them solid, just a little bit of material in there to make them stronger. And we added 1 inch out and 1 inch in. That just took the bubble out of the side of this. The 16-inch wheels leaves quite a bubble in the sidewall. Well, that's just a little bit of instability. Everybody's learned that now you stretch a tire out like the radial guys do. This tire is so rigid. The Mickey Thompsons are so cool. They're not like a Hoosier where they're more floppy. These tires have got a very stiff sidewall in this area right here. And then it gets kind of floppy. Some would call it a rag, and then it gets stiff again. So what happens when they're bubbled, they can distort, wobble, and grow, and just do different things. By stretching them out like this, this tread's only 15 inch and the wheel is 18 inch, so there's 3 inches. The tread is 1.5 inches shallower on each side. So the tire's literally bubbled out, stretched out, not bubbled, that's not the right word. It's stretched out, so it's gonna hold its shape better. And we're just trying what we need to do to try to get the 60s, the 330, and even the 8th mile we can stand to improve a little bit. This car's fast. We're wanting to get 1.0s out of this. So we're at that point now where we're working on nitpicking. And this is one of those things. But unfortunately, I set it up for those 16s and it worked out so well. At the track, I can let the air out of the tires, and I know exactly how to do it. I can take that tire off, get it out of my way, and put the street tire in with no fuss. This one, not so much. When you put the wheel up in there, the studs on the axles hit the back of the wheel, and the wheel hits right here. It's just miserable. So I tried everything. I thought, well, I hate to do this. Other people do it, but I don't want to be those people. I'll drop the shocks. Well, I actually dropped the bottom bolts out of the shocks. Then it hangs on the sway bar links. It didn't change anything. My sway bar links and my shocks bottom out at the same time. So I hooked shocks back up. I thought, I'm not going to lay under there and take the rear end apart. We've got to do something else. So I put that back together. I thought, okay, I'll take the wishbone loose at the front and I can shove the rear end to one side. Wrong again, because when it's jacked up and the rear end's hanging, you're hanging on those stabilizer struts, and in order to go to one side, it would have to lift one side or the other. You'd have to take the shocks, the stabilizer struts, and the wishbone loose to push it over. That wasn't happening. I'm not putting that much effort into it. We will go back to the 16s if that's what I had to do, but I just couldn't stand that. So I beat these fenders in because it was chewing the tire up trying to get it on and off. I've got that as far in, that's flat up to the quarter panel. Then, of course, we got to let the air out. I could put them on easier than I could get them off. Getting them off, I've got to push that sidewall in, and it's so stiff right here. That section at 3 inches of sidewall, my fingers were cramping trying to put it in. Finally, I went to bed on it. I didn't know what I was going to do. I can't turn my brain off at night. I thought vacuum pump. I've done this before, and when we first did it, I thought I would have to use a vacuum pump, and turned out I just figured out how to do it and didn't have to. But I got my vacuum pump out the next day, rigged up a hose, sucked them down, and they just go square. They just become stupid looking. But all I needed was just a little bit of clearance up here by sucking a vacuum into them, and as soon as it flattens one side out, I can basically turn it that direction and I can get them off. So since I've figured that out, Alex went to Harbor Freight and got a new vacuum pump. Mine's a Snap-on, and it's got a 1/2 horsepower motor on it. It's pretty heavy. I just wasn't looking forward to carrying it around, and our little generator, you turn the vacuum pump on it, just kill the generator like you pulled the spark plug wire off. I finally figured out that I could make it run. The generator would handle the 1/2 horsepower, but it didn't want to start. The start circuit was killing it. I could plug it in, start the generator come up to RPM, then it would kick in and it would run. So, but Alex bought a 3rd horsepower, 1 CFM less Harbor Freight unit, and it works good. So it takes like 3 minutes to suck the tire into just the craziest shape you've ever seen. I can get it off, put the street tires on with no effort. So that's the story. That's the dilemma I had on the 18s. I almost was ready to not use it. So this next trick, I had a little bit of trouble doing it. I was all for it, and then I got to thinking, I don't know if I like this or not. And then I went back and decided, we got to do what we got to do. And people do this all the time, and it's usually in different type of racing. Even though it's a big tire car, we still fight getting it down the track, getting it off the starting line, not the track. Down track, this thing is like Cadillac, anywhere from 60 foot on. It's just super happy. Sometimes the track conditions will make, even though it's a big tire car, make it a little bit tricky. She'll have to pull the power back just a little bit, and we have never hit this car with the power that we have available, ever. We've never been able to really get after it. And even though the tires were fantastic and the car goes really fast, it's got 1.60 foot, and it's running 219 miles an hour out the back door now. That's just crazy, if you ask me. We're going to try to get the 60 foot down a little bit. We'll get our 330s down, the 220 out the back door. This car should be running deep into the 6s, but it's that first half of the track that we're lacking in just a little bit. So Nick, being the street racer and the no prepper kind of back of the track racer that he is, thought that we needed weight in the back. Well, adding weight is, I totally know that. My Willys had weight boxes in it. It's been done forever and ever. I just really didn't want to do it to the car because we're already at 3,250 pounds, I think. But thought, what do we got to lose? We're going testing here for a couple days. I wanted to have everything available that we could do to make this thing better. So here's my solution. Nick had the weights, and we've got another set of these coming. There was no place in this car to put weight back here to clamp it on. So I made these 1.5-inch chrome moly tubes. I didn't bend it because by the time you put the radius in it, there wouldn't be much room in the middle. I actually welded these studs on here, welded caps on the end of it, tigged it onto the frame here, and those 1.5-inch chrome moly bars, just like the rest of the chassis is made out of, are solid on there. And these things right here are 25 pounds per side. So 12.5 pounds per weight times 2, 25, plus this over here, that's 50 pounds hanging right out here basically on the back bumper. I can add another set. That'll give me 100 pounds right here. You could add gasoline, but we're not going to send her down the track with a full tank of gas. So I'll pump the gas out of this thing when we get there because I don't want this bomb sitting back there. We can replace it with lead weights, and that's how I'm justifying it in my mind. I didn't want to put a Band-Aid on things, but we're racing on some tracks that are not necessarily friendly for our car, for a big tire car. We're racing on radial prep tracks on sick week. So we're trying to make the car act like a radial car, and that's one reason for putting a wider wheel on it to tighten that tire up and make it get down the track. So anything that we can have at our disposal or in our arsenal to make this thing go down the tracks that are not optimum for this car, I'm prepared to do. And this right here is just a tuning tool. The 4-link's a tuning tool, the shock's a tuning tool, the wheelie bar's a tuning tool, the air pressure in the back tires is a tuning tool. So all of those things, that's not to mention what she can do in the ECU, how many RPM she can leave on, how much boost she can leave on. All of that stuff is a variable. So think about all those things. To get a car to leave as hard as this thing leaves or harder like we're wanting to, there's a lot of variables there, and you have to figure out which one of those things you're lacking at. May not be this weight, this may come back out, but I can unbolt it and it doesn't cost me anything. The bars just stay right there. They don't weigh hardly anything. They're chrome moly. The weights are just an added tuning tool that we never had before. So we're going to work on trying to get those 60 foots down. And when we say down, we're already, remember, this thing's cut. It may have even cut I think our fastest 60 is 115. I said 119. It's actually 115. So we're 115ing a 3,300 pound car, basically, 55 Chevy. But we want to get down into 1.0s. So we get this thing down to 1.0s. You figure every tenth you cut off of the 60 is 2/10 on the big end, so they say. You know, that's dependent on the car and the way it makes horsepower and everything else. But it's definitely more down there than it is at the start. So that was something else that I did. I didn't do any video on it because honestly we've been busy and I just didn't have time to think about it. But that's our street fuel tank. Our battery's back here, big heavy Optima battery. We got our weights back here now. The rest that's carbon fiber. Our wheelie bars are chrome moly. There's no carbon fiber back here. So the thing is, I can't think of anything else. I've checked all the fluids. It's ready to go. I'm waiting for a filter to put into that line that you saw me hooking the converter charge pressure to. That valve right there, if it gets any debris in it at all, it will stick that valve, and that changes converter charge pressure. And it's one of those things that you have to pay attention to know that it's really a problem. So it can loosen the converter up if you drop the fluid pressure on that converter. And if the valve's stuck open, it'll drop the fluid pressure, and then you're actually not blowing through your converter, but you're actually driving through your converter a little bit, which will hurt everything. You know, hurt your ET. It'll especially hurt your bottom half of the track. So I'm putting a filter on there, which was supposed to be here, but the snow has messed our overnight shipment up. And that's the last thing I've got to do here. Now, let's go back here. I'll show you what's going on now, and you can follow along as I finish this up. So these 18-inch wheels changed everything. And when I built this trailer, I built it very specific for what we were doing at the time, and that was probably a mistake. I come around this side here, you can see what's going on. And the trailer is like the shop gets sometimes. It's a mess. It's a disaster right now. The tools are scattered all over the floor. The trailer's just in a massive disorder. But so I put our tires that we're not using up here. I made this shelf in here when I made it. I made it tall enough for the tires that we intend to use forever. But guess what? We changed the wheel. It's not the tire exactly that's the problem, it's the wheel. If you measure from the floor to the bars in the top, it's 18 1/4 inch. The tires measure 18 inches. So getting them in and out of there under this door is just pushing it to all it's got. But we can let the air out of the tires. I think we can shrink the sidewall where it's soft enough. If it doesn't, just go in and we can shove them in here. But there's no room left. What we used to do was and I can demonstrate that. Let me see if I can find my table here.
It's over here.
How did it get back there? Sneaky little sucker. So when we're at the track, we need a table to put our stuff on. We rebuild the motor on this table. We do whatever. Sometimes they'll sell shirts depending on where we are. But This trailer is so packed full of stuff. Alex is the one that has to do it. I turn that over to her. While I'm putting tires on the car, switching them back, she's packing the trailer. And when we're done with the day, it looks like this. Boxes are everywhere. So this is what has been, well, it's gonna explode on me here. This has been the standard for us for the last few years. This table goes right on top of the tires, and it just goes, it just clears. Now I've got the new dilemma, no place to put a table. There was no place in that trailer at all to put that table now. When this is packed full, it's all the way from the floor to that shelf and from the shelf to the ceiling or the roof. So I have to figure something else out. So for 2 nights, it bugged me. I wasn't necessarily awake. It didn't keep me awake, but it was just going in my head constantly how I'm going to pack this. So I came up with the idea of putting it in the front. And Alex said, can you just put it in the front? Make a rack and put them in the front? So if we're going to do that, we went ahead and got bigger tables. That's a 4-foot table when it's opened up. She went to Walmart today and bought us 2 5-foot tables, and they're heavier duty. So if we have to rebuild the motor, tear it down, we've got something to do it on, and we've got place for her to put her laptop when she needs to, our shoes, her clothes when she's there, you know, changing from street clothes to race clothes, our breakfast, drinks, whatever. And so what this is going to do, I just started building this thing. I'm going to bolt this at the top and bottom right on the front of the trailer, and it'll go through the tubing that's inside of the trailer. And then I just cut these pieces here. This is stuff that I had laying around, 1/8 inch by 2 inch aluminum angle iron. And I'm gonna build this structure. It'll have a bar across here. These tables, when we get there, we just pick them out, open them up. We'll put one right here, and we can put one somewhere else. And when we leave, we'll just set them back into this framework that I'm doing here. They'll be open to the elements. They're plastic, it doesn't matter. I'll put a bar across them somehow to lock them in at night so people can't steal them. Why they'd want to steal a trailer or a table, probably, I don't know, they probably wouldn't. But that's what I'm working on right now. Once I get this finished, the car is, and get that filter that hopefully will get here tomorrow, because this is just Tuesday. We're not leaving until Saturday, so we're still good. But we get that put back together, it's ready to go in the trailer. I'm pretty excited about that. One last thing that I did do, and this isn't my idea, somebody else did this, but I'm not going to buy one when I can make one. I welded a 15/16 socket. I machined it down, put it inside of an 1.25 inch piece of chrome moly, put rosette welds on it. So it goes up in there, welds around, and it has rosette welds. And then I put another socket in the end, rosette welded it. Now that's my lug socket. I can put this with the impact. So to get the big 1/2 inch impact in this wheel, you have to have an extension. Well, the extension, when you have a socket extension, one, the diameter will take up some of the impacting, and the other is the looseness inside the anvil here, and the one on the socket will take it up. And sometimes it's hard to break those lug nuts loose, because I'll give them quite a few ugga-duggas when I tighten them up. Now, this thing has just got one place for it to lose any torque, and that tube's not going to twist. This is now my lug socket to get that off, and the impact's right out here. So made that, and that should make my life a little bit easier. I should have recorded that, but there's not much to watch. I turned those sockets down and pressed them into that tube, and that made it a good solid piece. But that should be it for this video. Once we get this table in here, we'll throw some time lapses in here of putting this table together and putting it on the front of the trailer. And then next video we'll be loading it up and heading to Florida, right?
Yeah, Orlando.
Heading to Orlando for some testing. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Seeing that car do its thing, spool, start, do all it does, that's our routine that we do all the time. very normal for us, but when you think about that rusty, beat up, steel 55 Chevy stock dimension car going 200 and almost 20 miles an hour right now, that's pretty cool. That's 3,000 horsepower plus up in front. We've just put 10,000 miles on the car, and it's just pretty amazing when it boils down to it. So for those of you that haven't been around that, it's a pretty cool thing to see. One last thing I should have mentioned, and I always forget. Don't forget that we have t-shirts. Alex's store at alextaylorracing.com has multiple different shirts, and she's got some really cool shirts for the ladies, and they're selling like crazy. A really nice embroidered sweater with her logo, whatever it is, stay bitchin', be grumpy, go fast, I think. That's on there, and it's really cool. So go have a look at that if you don't mind, and don't forget I've got some COE shirts left. Those shirts are really cool, and they've sold a ton, and I appreciate you guys for buying all those, but there are some left, so if you want one of those. And don't forget that mutt. She's going with us to Florida. She'll be on with us on Sick Week, so if you want to say hi to Mika, she'll be there, but she also has her own shirt, and she's very proud of it.
And a sticker.
And sticker, yeah. So she'll be there to say hi to everyone. And if you don't mind, take a look at that merchandise, because it definitely helps out. Thank you. Something that just occurred to me, a lot of people might not know what a trans brake is or how it works or what it does. You hear the term all the time. We're so used to it that we don't think about it. Unless you're a real racer, a hardcore racer, a lot of people foot brake still. For a turbo car especially, a trans brake's really a necessary thing. I'm just going to give some basics on it. I'm not going to get into it too deep, but there's a lot of you that might not understand what I mean when we say trans brake, and you might not understand how she spooled this car. We'll call it spooling the turbos up. You never saw the back wheel move. How can you do that? Can the brakes possibly hold that kind of horsepower? So what she did was she hit the trans brake and she put the pedal to the floor. When you floor the gas pedal, this thing will make insane horsepower. She can control that horsepower with putting a rev limiter in the program that allows you to only get to a certain RPM. Say that was 4,500 maybe. And she can put in the boost that she wants to make at 4,500. So depending on your car, how good it works, and how much power you can make, how fast you can spool. Some people might leave on 5 PSI of boost. Some people might leave on 15 or 20 PSI of boost. So she usually last year was leaving on probably 12 pounds of boost. Now we're leaving closer to 15 pounds of boost, I think. I'm not driving, I'm not tuning. Alex does all that. But let's say that she's leaving at 4,500 RPM and 15 pounds of boost. She does her burnout. She backs up just like any other car. She puts it in reverse. To back up, she has to push this red button on the steering wheel. This button. When she pushes that in neutral or reverse on the shifter, the car will back up. So if it's in neutral, it'll back up. If it's in reverse, it'll back up. If it's in first gear or second gear, when you hit this, it locks everything up. The transmission will lock in reverse and first gear at the same time. So when you push that button, the fluid is directed in that thing to apply the band and first gear, and the transmission is basically internally fighting itself. It can't go anywhere. There's so much fluid pressure in these race transmissions. We're up to about 260 pounds of fluid pressure. So you're applying all that pressure to those clutches and to the band, and you're holding that transmission in reverse and first gear at the same time. Well, the rear axle, rear wheels are doing nothing. So what she does is you've got to do the staging thing, and everybody we race with does what's called courtesy staging. One pulls in, the other one pulls in pre-stage bulbs. Then the first guy goes back into the second stage bulb, and the other guy goes in the second stage bulb. That's kind of necessary to make these cars work like they should. If you want to be a dick and play with somebody, you can double bulb them, and then by the time they get in the second bulb and hit the trans brake, they may not be up on boost. So that's one dirty way of winning. Some people think that's really funny, but for what we're doing, it's not that. People aren't usually like that. They pretty much courtesy stage. So what she does is she turns the first bulb on, whether she's first or second in the beams, it doesn't matter. When the third bulb's turned on, she's holding down on that right button on the steering wheel. She's holding that right there. That is got the car locked in place. She will, in the first bulb, she'll start spooling. While she's got her finger on this, she'll put the pedal all the way to the floor. Now this thing's going to the chip. You know, we can say we're on the chip, and it's regulating how much boost those turbos are allowed to make. So she's sitting there in the first bulb, and all this happens very quickly, and she puts it on the floor, or anybody else with a turbo car, that thing starts spooling. Well, it starts making insane horsepower at that point. You know, at 15 pounds of boost and 4,500, I'm just making a guess, it's probably you're probably over 1,000 horsepower. So then the other button over here, just opposite of it, on the left side, is called a bump button. That one, she's still holding the right button in, and if she's in the first beam, she knows just how much to do it, but she'll push that twice, maybe. So I'm not even sure, 2 or 3 times. Depends on how the thing's set up in the ECU. But so now think about it. You're on the button on the right side, the car is locked in place. You're on the floor with the throttle, the RPMs are coming up, the boost is coming up, you hear this thing start popping. You see it in the video, flames start coming out. It's hit the chip. It's now on and we can make it where you don't even see the flames, but it helps to spool the turbos if it's banging and popping. So she's on the trans brake, and the thing starts banging and popping. It takes 3 seconds for this car. That's really fast. Some cars, 6-7 seconds, you can get into trouble when you have to spool that long. Everything's getting hot. The torque converter, the only thing that's the transmission's locked, the motor's making tons of horsepower. The fluid in the converter is just swishing in there, and it's driving right through that torque converter. And think of that fluid in there for 7 seconds. It's building some tremendous heat. But this car takes 3 seconds. The other day in those videos that you saw, this thing made 15 pounds or 14 pounds, I think it was, she had it set at, in 3.3 seconds or something like that. So now back to where I was. She's on the trans brake. The first bulb on the Christmas tree's turned on, the pre-stage bulb. The other guy's got both bulbs lit, possibly. And what's she do next? How do you get into the second bulb? You can't let the trans brake off. You're going to launch. As soon as you let the trans brake off, it goes to the maximum RPM, the RPM that the main rev limiter's set at. If you spin the tires or whatever, but it's going to launch. It activates that main rev limiter, and the boost is on a ramp. So she programs the boost. So if she's got 15 pounds, say this is pounds on this side, which would be, I think that's called Y on the tables, and this is X. So if she's over here at 15 pounds of boost at 3,000, say 4,500 RPM, when she lets the button out, she builds a curve. It's a graph that how fast she wants that boost to come in. She can make it go straight in, or she can drag it all the way out the quarter mile before it gets all its boost. So she builds a curve in that thing, and as soon as you let that button out, it activates all of this stuff. The RPM goes up, the throttle's already wide open, the boost starts going up, and the car's hauling butt. That's how you control power management. That's how you keep those tires from just blowing off. Because if it was like the old days when you just flat foot the car, if the track is really bad, you just light the tires up, and in the 60s they just smoked the tires until they quit smoking. This is all about power management. So the way she does it, when she's on that right hand thumb and she's in the first bulb and she's got her foot flat on the floor and this thing's held at 4,500, now it's blowing flames out. It's pop, 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 pop. It's on the chip. what she's got to do is get into that second bulb really quick. So she's holding this, which is locking the trans brake. She pushes this, and I think she goes 3 times, maybe 2 times. But 2 times, what that does is it releases the trans brake, even though you're holding it on. It's called a bump button, and that unlocks the transmission momentarily. It's all programmed into the ECU, so she programs in how much time it gets to unlock that transmission, and the car moves. So she's wide open throttle. That's got to blow some minds, because it really is kind of weird. Wide open throttle, the car's stuck. She just pushes that button 2 or 3 times and it bumps in. We call it bumping into the beam. So she bumps in, she rides the brake at the same time, so the car doesn't do this. If you don't, you're just you're taking slack out of the rear end gears and the transmission gears, and the car's rocking back and forth. And you'll see some do that. They'll be in the bulb, they'll be bumped in the second bulb, and the car's going back and forth, and the bulb's turning on and turning off. That just screws it up for everyone. Starter doesn't know what to do. Everybody's getting held there for extra time until the bulbs settle down. So she rides the foot brake, does all of that stuff to get the car in the beams, we call it. And then once she's in that second beam and the other guy's in the second beam, as soon as the green light comes on, in this case, this is a 4/10 Pro tree. So from the time that the green light comes on till the time that till she has to get across the beam is 4/10 of a second. So you basically, it's unlike a bracket tree where you got the bulbs that come down in half-second increments and you got 3 of them. Seems like eternity to people that race on a pro tree. And this is a 4/10 tree instead of a 5/10 tree. She has trouble with a 5/10 tree because she's too quick. So she sees green, she lets the button out. The car is very quick to react. The trans brake that's in here is from Extreme Automatics, and it's an incredibly fast trans brake. So she's got so accustomed to it and knows how to do it so well that see the light, let the button out, and the car moves. All that stuff has a delay. The car has a delay moving forward till it breaks that beam. Her physical, how fast you can let the button out from the time your eyes see the light is a delay. The time that the light actually comes on, then the counter starts counting till the time that it breaks the beams. These are LED lights, most of them now, so they're quicker, but the old incandescent bulbs would actually have to warm up, and we couldn't see that, but it actually does. So for reaction time, to make it really quick, the LED bulbs have helped that, but all of that stuff has to happen in 4/10 of a second in order for that. She's got to break the beam to get rolling out there, and it's all got a delay. So when you see somebody cutting a really good light, like a 00 something or even an 01, that's really good reaction times, because everything factors into that. The bulb, the tire wrap, you're squishing a tire down, that adds up. That time adds up. Moving this 3,300 pound lug, so all of that adds up. But that's what the trans brake is, and you see that in the video. When she's spooling it, she's just locking the transmission. She's sitting there next to a transmission that's locked in reverse and first gear at the same time, and she's putting whatever, I'm just pulling a number out of thin air, 1,000 horsepower to that transmission. The car's not going anywhere, but that's allowing the RPM to come up, that's allowing the exhaust gases to flow really freely, and they go into the turbos, and that spools those turbos up. Now those turbos are making boost. If you had to spool them when the light turned green, this thing would be a massive turd. It has to be up on the spool, it has to be making boost before you ever let it out. So once she lets the button out, that's when that graph starts, it's the pulsing of the CO2 to the waste gates, and everything starts taking place, and then the boost starts building. But that gets her out, gets her rolling, and that's how they street race. That's you on a very sketchy surface with a very small tire. That's the thing these days. They go very fast because they're managing that power from the get-go. When the flashlight comes on or the arms drop, they're tuned up to where they can manage their power to get moving before they throw full power to it. So that's what that's all about. I just thought maybe you'd like to know exactly what spooling a turbo does and how a trans brake works. Okay, that was that. What a mess. Sorry for the choppy video and kind of put together from a bunch of different things. So we got the table rack, we got the 55, we got the education on how to stage a turbo car. But I think it'll be interesting to some of you. Some of you know all about it. Just skip through it, I guess. But this thing's done. I had Alex come over. I drilled through in the 4 spots and she got inside, which only she could do because it's like this big, without taking the tires out, and she put the nuts on the backside. So I'm pretty proud of it. I think it looks like a Western t-shirt pocket, which I didn't intend for that, but I may have to do some changing because this is not the Cowboy Up 55. This is the Too Bad 55. So show you what this thing's all about. I guess I should have had this lock unlocked. I just stuck it on here just to see if it was. And this is where we're going to edit some out. I don't even know what key goes in here. Oh no, we don't have a key for our lock. There we go. All right. So, trying to figure out how to lock those things in. Not that I'm worried about somebody really wanting them, but some transient or something might walk by and see it looks like a good place to keep stuff. So I just made this thing, and it just goes in there. And if you want them bad enough, you can get them, but they're a little bit heavy. But they just go in. So now we've got a spot for 2 tables, which we've never had that much room inside. So I'm kind of excited about that. We're going to have 2 tables set up. They can lock in place, and that solved that problem. So I don't have to stay awake tonight thinking about it or even work on it in my sleep. But next video will be, I don't know, actually. I'm not sure. I was thinking it'd be on the way to Florida, but I guarantee I won't do any video because I just don't think about it and don't want to. So the next ones will actually probably be Alex's videos of testing and tuning, and during the week, sick week, will be, that's kind of the way we work things. I'll film the 55 as long as it's in here, but when we go out, that's kind of her content. So for the next video, we'll have the one you're watching, and then I don't know what my next one's going to be. Maybe this Camaro that's lurking in the corner over here. And Alex's will be filling in that space. So you'll have to go to her channel to watch us during sick week. But please do that. It should be good. It always is interesting. So until next time, go fast, be bitchin', stay grumpy, whatever my logo's supposed to be. And we'll see you sometime down the road.